A lot to get across. We'll get across those headlines and more. And to do that, I'm joined now by Sky News senior reporter Trudy McIntosh out of Canberra and senior writer and columnist for News Corp Papers, Peta Credlin. Welcome to you both. We'll start with national security if we can, please. We're only, 2 days on now from ASIO raising the alert level for terror from possible to probable. Mike Burgess, though, has warned the agency's resources are stretched and they need more funding from the Albanese government.
We are stretched, but you appreciate if I needed more money, I'd ask that in private to government. My job as Director on Security is to make sure I have the laws and the resource to do our job. We're stretched is probably all I want to say publicly.
Trudy, you know, it's pretty hard to detect the sort of terror threats we're experiencing. Radicalisation's happening very quickly. We know there's a lot of young people involved. We've known all of this, though, from October 7. So we've gone through all the budget rounds, a May budget, and still you can hear that he's gone public, the ASIO chief, that he doesn't have enough money to do his job properly. I am surprised he's gone public. I'm surprised the government isn't giving him everything he needs to keep Australians safe.
And Mike Burgess, Peter, is very careful with his language, isn't he? He chooses every word very carefully, and you imagine that was done deliberately there. He used the word stretch twice. This is a big problem facing ASIO in terms of that caseload of people. Intelligence sources I spoke to earlier in the week were speaking about just the number of people that they're trying to monitor, people they'd previously deemed as not breaching that threshold of crossing to violence. They now have to reassess that caseload inside ASIO. As for the resource question, Mike Burgess now has a new minister after that reshuffle, moved from Home Affairs, now under the Attorney-General and Mark Dreyfus, so he can make his case there. I did go back and look at the budget. There was a small boost in May, $76 million, but clearly still stretched, so the ASIO boss doesn't believe it was enough.
I'll make the point too, if someone's under a control order, so they've got to be monitored and watched, you're looking at 3 teams of agents, 2 or 3 people per team, to run that 24-hour cycle. So it's a huge resourcing impost, and that's not even dealing with what we're dealing with post October 7. Let's go to other issues. Work from home. I tell you what, 24 hours on, and the New South Wales Premier is facing a public backlash from his public servants after he abruptly ended work from home and ordered them all back into the office. Some of them are even planning to boycott businesses, so force them back into the city, but they're not going to get their coffee from city businesses, they say, as punishment somehow for the Premier. I don't understand this one. Patrick, Chris Minns' own uncle, he's a senior executive in the Department of Health. He's against the move. He says to his staff the mandate won't affect their work from home arrangements, so stay at home. Others in departments have been told they won't be affected either. So what, a decision by the Premier now means nothing?
Well, it sort of seems that way, doesn't it? It seemed so dramatic when he announced it the other day. You know, tens of thousands of workers would come back into the city. But what we need to recognise here, which I frankly don't understand, what started as an emergency measure somehow became a job entitlement. You know, in the 2.5 years since the pandemic ended, and you saw Jacinta Allen down here in Victoria talking about, well, we're not going to change the rules. We're going to let people keep working from home, even though it has such a massive and dramatic effect on the economy, especially in Victoria, which is, you know, close to bankrupt, not hitting any of the measures in terms of productivity or anything else. To actually call this an entitlement really beggars belief, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I mean, they've got to get back into the office. This is not just obviously in Victoria, but also in Canberra and around the country. Let's go to some of that economic data. Obviously, we have the RBA yesterday keeping the cash rate on hold. They are still concerned about inflation being above target. We know it's close to 4, and of course their target band is a lot lower than that. Michelle Bullock says part of the problem, Trudy, government spending. That's why inflation's higher than it needs to be. The Treasurer, though, well, he disagrees.
This decision is welcome because it recognises the progress that we've made on underlying inflation. We are confident about the Australian economy. We are confident we can continue to see inflation moderate. We're confident that we can continue to grow.
Trudy, he's happy to take all the kudos, even though it's been revealed today that their flagship policy, this is to reduce the cost of your power bill, $300 per person, per household handout. Well, that's yet to be delivered in New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia because of red tape. Now, he can't spin this away. The RBA are saying spending by government is ticking up inflation. It's Economics 101. You better read the memo.
Well, it's not just the federal government in the RBA sites, though. I'd point out that states are spending like crazy too, particularly in Queensland ahead of that election. That energy rebate you got from the federal government, in Queensland you also got an extra $1,000 on top of that. So the states are making the situation worse as well. As for the politics, it's really fascinating to see Jim Chalmers now publicly disagree with direct comments from Michelle Bullock, his hand-pointed RBA governor. Today he was put to him on radio this explicit quote that she had said about the economy being too hot, and his answer was, well, I don't accept that and I don't agree. But we are getting into the pre-election cycle, and I think we're going to see a little bit more distance now between the Treasurer and the RBA, particularly if we do see rates go up before the election, heaven forbid.
And I tell you what, when they're working around the strategy table of options to go early, options to go into next year, this is the number one issue. Cost of living is the number one issue, and playing hard into that obviously is rates, but also housing. We'll go to housing actually now, because in Victoria, there's a promise to build homes. We know there's a national build target of 1.2 million homes by the end of the decade, well behind schedule. But Victoria have all of these other projects inside that overall target. We hear today that they've quietly scrapped 15 separate projects and pulled the funding. So, Patrick, you know, the game here is they go out there, they make the pretty little announcement. We all cover it on TV that night. It gets into the print media. People think the homes are coming, and then a couple of months down the track, they take the money out of there, they scrap the project, possibly re-announce it somewhere else. But we're not seeing, these are phantom homes. We're not seeing anything built. And the journalists, up until now, haven't picked it up. Well, thank God they have, but this isn't good enough.
No, I remember Dan Andrews announcing that back in 2020. He was wearing a hard hat, of course. He talked about $5.2 billion for 12,000 new homes. It sounded great at the time, very grandiose. 4 years later, I think there's 3,000 to 5,000 homes built under this program, and the state government doesn't know where it's going to find the money to actually build the rest. And Dan Andrews too, going back to 2022, he promised just before he resigned 800,000 new homes for Victoria in the next 10 years. He resigned. It sounded good at the time. And you look at the numbers since, there's no way in the world there's going to be 800,000. It'll be closer to 500,000. So that, you make a very good point. That difference between the announcement itself and the moment of reckoning many years down the track allows these politicians to make the most airy statements that they probably know will never come true.